I'll get into a bit of an introduction shortly, but basically what we're going to be talking about tonight is getting started in microwaves. So I'm Hayden, VK7HH, also hold the call sign KD9SSB, which is a technician license in the United States. And I have a YouTube channel called Ham Radio DX. And I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of the places that you can find me. Just pop in Ham Radio DX and you will find me. So a little bit about me. I started on YouTube about 2000 and late 2018, to early 2019. The primary reason that I started on YouTube actually was to document my microwave journey, because I have a habit of forgetting a lot of things that I do. So I thought if I videotape it and document what I've built and how I've built it, I might be able to remember if I need to ever look it up ever again. So that was the reason why I started. I definitely don't know everything there is to know about microwaves. All this presentation is basically getting started and how I went about it. Others may be different. There's lots of different ways to do it, of course. But if you have a look on YouTube, if you look for Ham Radio DX, there's a couple of my older videos are on there. There's a couple of playlists. One's called 2 Gigahertz and Beyond, that has a lot of my early microwave experimentation videos. And there's also a microwave newcomers playlist as well, so you can check that out. And there's a couple of thumbnails there of some of the videos we did. EME, Earth Moon Earth, on 10 gigahertz. We also did some DX on 1296 on 1.2 gigahertz on tropospheric ducting. So there's a picture of the dish there. And also FT8 on 3.4 gigahertz and some other experimentation on that band as well. So there's all sorts of different videos too if you want to check that out later on. At the moment, the current subscriber count at the top there is incorrect. It's not. This was actually a couple of weeks ago, so it's just over, I think, 9,600 now. So it's growing very, very quickly. So a bit of a starter, we just have a look at some of the frequency bands that everyone would be familiar with. So HF, a lot of people would be familiar with that, of course, 3 to 30 megahertz, 100 meters to 10 meters. As we start to move up the spectrum, we get to VHF, which is 30 megahertz to 300 megahertz, or 10 to 1 meter. Then we get to UHF. Now, that encompasses 300 megahertz to 3,000 megahertz, or 3 gigahertz. Now, we tend to refer to microwaves as sort of 1 gigahertz and above, but it actually is UHF. It's still in the UHF band, so it's not technically microwave. But for all intents and purposes, as soon as you get to a gigahertz, we seem to refer to that as microwaves. SHF, super high frequency, that encompasses most of the popular amateur bands that we use. So 3.4 gigahertz, 5.8 gigahertz, 10 gigahertz, 24 gigahertz, all are in the SHF band. So that covers 3 to 30. Then we start to get up to really high frequencies, or extremely high frequencies rather, 30 gigahertz to 300 gigahertz. So some of the amateur bands up there, 47 gigahertz. I'm trying to remember. It's 100 and something gigahertz is what we're experimenting with in VK3 and VK7 now. 120 something gigahertz. I can't remember. But very, very high. And then we start to get up to terahertz, or tremendously high frequency, which is starting to get towards light. And there is a slide in there about some of the experimentation that we've done in VK7 using modulating light, which is up in that frequency band. So some of the common microwave bands, generally but not technically, as I said, everything above 1 gigahertz is classed as microwave. So that encompasses the popular ones here: 1296 megahertz, 23 centimeters. That's the starting band, the starter band, as most would be familiar with on the IC 9700 and Kenwood TS2000 and other rigs like that. All have 1.2 gigahertz built into them. 2.4 gigahertz, which we have a slice of spectrum on, which is in the LIPD band, or the around where all the Wi-Fi access points are. So it's rather noisy band, but if you get away from that noise, it's quite a fun band to be on. 3.4 gigahertz, which is 9 centimeters. Again, we've lost some spectrum there, but we still have a little bit still to play with. So that's proving quite fun. 5.8 gigs, 10 gigs, and then 24 gigahertz, and we keep on going up and up and up. Once you start to get above 24 gigs, the amount of stations that have them starts to get less and less because the equipment can get rather expensive or can be quite complicated to put together. The photo there is from my Earth, Moon, Earth video where we were doing a 10 gigahertz Earth, Moon, Earth, and the system there is a 60 watt system on 10 gigahertz, and the dish I think is 60 centimeters. So quite a good system. You'll also notice the gun scope pointing through the dish there, which helps with aligning to the moon. So why would we want to play with microwave? Well, it can be a new challenge. Sometimes once we play around with HF, VHF, and UHF, we want to challenge ourselves a little bit more. We can design and construct our own equipment. Sometimes the design and construction of your own equipment is more rewarding and more fulfilling than actually making the contacts. You can repurpose old commercial gear and antennas, so especially dishes that have come from commercial links and systems. They the 10 gigahertz dishes, I think that they obtained here in VK7 were from old Hydro Tasmania links. You can study and experiment with propagation over short to long distances. So as you get higher and higher in frequency, it becomes more difficult over these paths due to whatever's in between. So water vapor, humidity, hills, trees, all sorts of things. So you can experiment with that. There are novel propagation modes such as tropospheric ducting and rain scatter and all sorts of different things. Of course, you can play about with. Generally, microwaves are referred to as line of sight, but they're not always. And there's a couple of times where we've had non-line of sight contacts due to these propagation modes such as tropospheric ducting, rain scatter, or sometimes even things such as knife edge refraction or reflection off of mountains and other solid surfaces that you can bounce the signals off. You can also have large bandwidths because we have a lot of band to play with up there. We can do high-speed data and amateur television and other modes that require large bandwidth, so that we don't have lower down. And you can operate portable as well, so you can have fun doing that. So this is a bit of a joke slide that I put in. Every year we have the Gips Tech convention, and it's always a joke that you have to have a beard to work the microwave bands. So here's a bit of a beard gain versus length. So you can see my beard on the left-hand side's unity gain, a little bit longer than that's 3 dB, and a little bit longer than that's 6 dB. So that's a bit of an in-house joke for those that might be in the club here who attend Gips Tech. A beard seems to be the mandatory thing for working microwaves. So some of the things, one of the things that we've done, down here in VK7 is Earth, Moon, Earth, or Moonbounce. There's a picture there of Rex with his the 60 watt system, I think, in that photo. Yeah. And the photo below that, I think, was his previous system. I think it's the same dish. He's got a couple of those, so it's hard to identify. So Earth, Moon, Earth, for those that aren't aware, is using the moon as a passive RF reflector. So you can do this on 6 meters, 2 meters, 70 centimeters, 1296, all the way up to very high frequencies. Of course, the higher you go, the more difficult it can become. Generally, sometimes there are some bands that are easier than others. This is using mainly JT65, so WSJTX mode. So those that might be familiar with FT8 or Whisper, using the JT65 mode in that program. Rex is the current VK and world record holder for 10 gigahertz. So I think that was from New Zealand to somewhere in the United States, I think. I can't remember. Oh no, sorry, it might have been Europe. It was a Golf 3 station in the UK. Can't remember the distance, but he is the current world record holder. He also is the VK terrestrial world record holder as well, from far northeastern Tasmania over to Albany in VK6. So that's quite a distance on 10 gigahertz. And this last summer, he also made the first contact on 10 gigahertz from VK7 to ZL as well. There also is a German 10 gigahertz beacon, which runs pointing at the moon all the time. Sometimes it's operational, sometimes it's off air. But generally, when it's on air, you can use this for equipment testing and setup. So you've got a nice beacon to listen to and check your system and make sure it's all running. I think it uses quite a bit of power to do that. So you can easily see it on your waterfall. So some of the other experimentation that we've done in VK7, 23 centimeters is very, very popular down here. We use Mount Wellington, which overlooks Hobart, as a passive reflector. For those that are familiar with Mount Wellington, there's some sharp cliffs on the northeastern side of the mountain, which we call the organ pipes, which make a very good reflector of RF when you point your antenna at them. So generally every Sunday we have a QSO party after our broadcast, and we all point our 1296 megahertz Yagis towards that mountain and make contact, and then we go away for the week and maybe make some tweaks and some some changes, maybe a different antenna or whatever to our system, and see how it goes the next week. And it's funny too, because it varies from week to week and from season to season as well. So it's not always consistent. And you can see a photo there. We're actually in Rex's garage making some 1296 megahertz antennas. We had a build day, and Richard VK7ZBX, who's on the ground there, was making a 6 meter long 1296 megahertz antenna. So it's got quite a bit of gain, and the beam width is very, very narrow. When he has it operating at home, he has to be very, very accurate on his rotator to make sure he's lined up on someone. So we also use 2.4 gigahertz. There's a couple of us, including myself, that have 2.4. 3.4 gigahertz, we converted the panels from the Geelong Amateur Radio Club. A couple of us still have those. A couple of us have had problems with those. I converted mine a couple of years ago and it worked flawlessly. But I removed it and upgraded it to another unit, and my panel's sitting somewhere. I know I need to donate it to somebody to get them on the air. But a couple of them were a bit deaf, and some didn't output power. And when you get up to these frequencies, it's hard because you need test gear, of course, to get up to these frequencies, and it's hard to make sure your equipment's running. So you rely on other people to give you a hand. 10 gigahertz, again, terrestrial and EME, mostly just a couple of stations that have 10 gigahertz around here. I think we've got in Hobart, we've got three permanent stations on 10 gigahertz and 5 systems. I think 3 of those systems belong to Rex, so he's the 10 gigahertz man. A couple of stations also run 24 gigahertz, so that can be quite challenging due to the water absorption issues due to rain and humidity and all sorts of things across the path. That's the other band I was thinking of, 122 gigahertz. So I think that's the latest experiment now that's using car radar, repurposed car radar chips. And there's a little board from VK3 Charlie Victor, I think it is. And I think some of you guys over there in VK3 have been experimenting with that too. So that's a very challenging band due to the frequency and the beam widths. So some of the other things that we also did that we haven't done for a little while, but I think the systems are still operational, is optical. So this is at 470 terahertz using LED lights. The box there's to the bottom left is affectionately known as the cloud burner, because the light's so intense it breaks through the clouds. And this is using non-line of sight paths using particle scatter, and again using the WSJTX modes. And there was a one-way bass straight contact made with VK7MO and VK7JG Joe, who's unfortunately a silent key, over 219 kilometers. And there was also many contacts made between Mount Barrow in the north and Mount Wellington in the south using that. And amusingly, one day, Hobart, Mount Wellington has a habit of attracting a lot of attention in the media and other people. And one day, the red light was illuminating from Mount Wellington, pointing on a test path, I think down towards the airport somewhere, or Sorel, somewhere out there. And we had the police just coming up to check on what was happening up on top of the mountain, because as soon as you light up anything on top of that mountain, you're bound to find someone in the city that'll see it and complain about it or report it. So moving on to some equipment. So for 1.2 gigahertz 1296, that's a very easy band to get on. As I said, you've got the ICOM IC9700, Kenwood TS2000X with the module installed in it. The Yaesu FT736. The other one is the ICOM IC910, for those that might have that radio. There's a couple more that I can't think of off the top of my head. There's a lot of Yaesu mobiles that are FM only. There's also a lot of handhelds as well that are FM only. The mobiles were designed a number of years ago. I think there was a popular Mitsubishi module which output 10 watts on 1296 megahertz, and they just put them on all those mobiles, and they were a perfect fit for making 1296 meg mobile. So you might be able to pick one of those up on the used market. So the other piece of equipment that you generally need if you're using a thing such as a transverter is an IF radio. So this is usually on 2 meters or 70 centimeters and low power. So FT817, 818, IC705, or a handheld, those type of things. So the transverter itself is an up-down converter. It has a local oscillator that mixes with the IF radio frequency. So, for example, the local oscillator in the SG Lab transverter in the bottom right-hand corner is on 1152 megahertz. That mixes with a 2 meter IF, which is 144 megahertz, and you get 1296 out. And you can switch the LO in those particular models to suit whatever you like. So I think you can have a 1154 LO and 115. Yeah, 1150 LO. I can't remember, but you can use a 146 megahertz IF, so say a handheld or something if you want to use FM. Directional antennas are generally required. You can use omnidirectional antennas, but mostly directional antennas for efficiency. So Yagis on 1.2 gigahertz. When you start to get above that, you need things such as grid packs or dishes, which are still easy to come by. You can still modify a lot of equipment that you can get from, say, tip shops or from commercial use. Low loss coax, so rigid hardline, so no using RG58 or 213. The loss is too much. So Andrews type hardline or Heliax, as we like to call it. Or very, very short lengths of very, very short lengths of hardline, which is similar size to RG58, but it's got less loss at those frequencies. Preamplifiers, sequencers, and coax switches are required if you want to build a larger system. So the preamp will compensate for any loss in your receive chain if you mount that near the antenna. Sequencers allow the controlling of transmitting and receiving and switching on and off coax switches and preamps so that you don't blow things up. And if you want to do digital modes, then you require high stability and no drift. So generally, GPS locking is required for digital modes because of the tolerances required there. So some suppliers, I mentioned the SG Lab transverters. I've had 3 of those transverters, and they work absolutely great. They're a great standalone little unit. As in terms of price to just get straight on the band or on the bands and start using them, they're pretty well priced. So generally between $200 to $300 for one of those transverters out of Bulgaria. They do take a little while because he does have quite a few orders. I know in VK7 we've just put another order in for 3.4 gigahertz transverters from him. I'm hoping that he starts to do 5 ones for 5.8 and hopefully 10 gigahertz one day. But I actually asked him about it the other day, but I haven't received a reply. But if you go to sg-lab.com, you'll find some data sheets on some of his transverters there. He doesn't have the 3.4 gigahertz version on his website, but if you ask him about it, he'll send you the information and the price. He also sells a 25 watt PA for 1.2 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz as well. So you can use those. In VK3, I think Andrew VK3FS and a few others have successfully mounted these in a little die-cast box because they're only a very small transverter, and just place them at the back of the dish and or the grid pack, and it makes a nice little compact unit that you can just pull out for field day or portable and pop on a pole, and you're good to go. They output around about 2.5 watts as well. So which is actually, it's quite surprising how far and how well you can make contacts using 2.5 watts. There's the DB6NT, the Kune line of transverters. So they're a little bit more expensive, but they are very, very high quality. From Germany. So that's generally what the systems that we run on 10 gigahertz and above use down here. So they've got transverters up to 47 gigahertz, and they also have low noise amplifiers and power amplifiers and such as well. So yeah, a very, very good kit, but very expensive. The power output, I think, of those as well is around, I think 10 gigahertz, I think, is around 150 or 200 milliwatts, which again doesn't sound like a lot of power, but you can still make pretty good contacts with that amount of power if you use decent sized dishes that have quite a bit of gain. So some of the other suppliers as well, Down East Microwave, that are based out of the US, they have quite a few transverters and kits and things that you can get from them. Mini Kits, of course, in South Australia have a few transverters. I think they've got a 1.2 gigahertz transverter and a few preamps and other bits and pieces that you can get. eBay is very good because you can get preamps, attenuators, little bits to coax and SMA connectors and all those things on the cheap, and they are pretty good quality if you know where to look. The quality, usually I just check how many of them they've sold and what the feedback is like for the seller, and that gives you an indication of what they're like. But I've got some various parts from different suppliers, and they've been very good. So my microwave station currently consists of a IC 9700 on 1.2 gigs, plus a SG Lab 25 watt power amplifier and low noise amplifier in one. And I have a 36 element antennas amplifiers Yagi, which is located at my remote station, which is just outside of Hobart, using LDF 450 feed line. And you can see the antenna down the bottom. That antenna from Antennas and Amplifiers comes from Serbia. He makes very, very good antennas. They're very easy to put together, and that antenna is awesome. It works really, really well. And in that box, just below the antenna, is the low noise amplifier and the PA, which is to the right there, which again is as I said, from SG Lab. So that's good because I feed DC up to the box. It runs on 12 volts, and it gives me 25 watts out, and I have a very, very short run of coax to the antenna. And because the low noise amplifier is up there and switches in and out as the radio transmits and receives, I have not a lot of loss. So it works very, very well. I am considering upgrading it to get a little bit more power though, because 25 watts can be a bit limiting sometimes. My 2.4 gigahertz station consists again of an SG Lab transverter and what we call a Spectrian power amplifier. These come from the United States, I think, and they come out of old 2.3 gigahertz transmitters that they had multiples of these power amplifiers in series and to deliver huge amounts of power, but by themselves they deliver about 63 watts at 24 volts. At 12 volts, it's around about 25 watts. So yeah, I can run it portable off a battery, or and I'll get 25 watts out. Or if I've got a generator and a power supply with 24 volts, I'll get 63 watts out, which is pretty good. I've also got a preamp in a mini circuits preamp in the transverter. I have a sequencer, which is from Mini Kits. I have a bandpass filter, which I got from VK3. I got from a VK3. I can't remember his call sign. And also a coax switch. So that switches between my transmit and my receive chain. And I've just got a standard Wi-Fi grid pack antenna, which I bought, which was a TP-Link 2.4 gigahertz grid pack, which I went to try and find another one the other day so that I could convert it to 3.4 gigahertz, and they've been discontinued and you can't find them anywhere. So it's a bit of a shame, but you can still use the old grid packs that they used for pay TV back when Ozstar and Foxtel used to use. I think they used to do that in VK3. They certainly did here. They used to run pay TV over 2.4 gigs. So that's a photo of my station. So it's a little bit messy. There's wires going everywhere, but I have the cover on the top, so a lot of people don't really see this, and it works. So I'm not sure if you can see my mouse pointer there, but basically it starts. You can see the blue coax at the back. That's the antenna input or the output, sorry, to the antenna. That goes into the coax switch, which is on the common port of the coax switch. And then one side of the coax switch following that blue coax goes into the Spectrian power amplifier output on the right-hand side. You'll notice the very, very large heatsink that is in there because they get tremendously hot. So I've got an old Unilab KL450 heatsink that was cut in thirds, put in there. And I've also got two fans, one blowing cold air in and two extracting it out because it gets really, really hot. Even on single sideband, it'll get hot after a while. So to keep that cool. And then the input of the amplifier runs back to the transverter, and you can see the blue coax going into the silver boxed transverter on the left-hand side. The receive chain is pretty similar. That just goes back through that bandpass filter. You can see all those tuning slugs of that copper colored, or I think it is copper, bandpass filter. And that helps to reduce the emitter band that we've got is 2403 megahertz, 2.403 gigahertz. Channel 1 Wi-Fi, I think, is just above that. So that notches the channel 1 Wi-Fi down and gets rid of a lot of noise from channel 1 Wi-Fi from everyone's Wi-Fi running at their house. And then I feed a preamp there from a mini circuits preamp, and that gives me a little bit more from the loss that I get. And I've got the mini circuits preamp up in the top left-hand corner. So that does all the switching. It switches on and off that coax switch. It switches on and off the preamp. It controls the transverter from releasing RF, and so it doesn't release RF too early. And there's some other bits and pieces in there as well that probably not as important. Oh, and there's also a 10 megahertz input as well. So I've got a BNC or an SMA on the back of this unit where I just feed a 10 megahertz from a GPS straight into it, and that locks that transverter to GPS. So I'm on frequency and I'm good for digital modes. My station on 3.4 gigahertz is similarly built in a rack mounted box. So it's another SG Lab transverter. I used to have those Geelong Amateur Radio Club panels mounted in this box, but I had microphonics and other issues, so I switched to the SG Lab. It's using a Stealth SM3437 power amplifier, which is 20 watts out. These I think are still available on eBay. They're a purple power amplifier. Some vary, so depending on which one you get, some will actually do 30 watts, some will do 20 watts. The one I've got does 20. Again, preamp sequencer coax switch in there. I've got a couple of antennas. I've got the panel antenna, which is originally from the Geelong Amateur Radio Club. I have a 65 centimeter dish, which I've done some videos on with various different feeds. And the bottom left-hand corner, we've got a 1.2 meter dish with a soup can feed, which just sits on the end of the arm and works very well. It's a very, very sharp antenna. I'm also thinking of getting a grid pack because it's a little bit easier to carry around rather than a 1.2 meter dish. And again, here's a photo, very similarly built. A lot of wires going everywhere, doing various things, but same sort of thing, coax switch, preamplifier, following the blue coax there back into the SG Lab box. And there's the purple amplifier, as you can see. And I've got attenuate. I need attenuators on this to reduce the amount of RF going into that that amplifier, because that amplifier requires 1 milliwatt of drive for 20 watts out. So I think it's something like 50 dB of gain, I think, off the top of my head. Is that right? 47 dB gain, something like, I can't remember. Might not be that much. 40 something dB gain. So yeah, I need to attenuate the 2.5 watts coming out of that transverter down to 0 dBm or 1 milliwatt. So some of the achievements that I have managed, and again, I don't know an awful lot about this stuff. I just tinkered with it and played with it until I understood the basics. 1.2 gigahertz national VKZL record. So that's currently standing at 2,458 kilometers between myself and ZL1IU. Rex, coincidentally, on the very same day, broke the VK7 record, and he held the VK7 record for 7 minutes until I broke it after him, and that was actually exceeded the VK record as well. So that was pretty good. And that was from my remote station. This last summer, we also broke the 2.4 gigahertz national VKZL record. So that's 2,379 kilometers, which we hope to try and extend a little bit further. We were located on the bottom left-hand corner there. We were located on the East Coast, right on the water. We were sort of experimenting whether it was better to be high up on the mountains, low down on the beach. So we settled for something in between. And we managed to contact on CW. So we're hoping to do SSB next time. And 3.4 gigahertz, currently the VK7 digital record holder, which is 502 kilometers, which is not that far. So hopefully that can be broken by someone else and give us another challenge to try and break that. And our setup down on the bottom right-hand corner was from January 2020, I think. That day was, I think, 40 degrees that day, and it was a very, 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 very hot day. So it was great for tropospheric ducting. So we set up at that location, and that was the day we broke the 1296 megahertz record. So here's some more photos of our portable operation. You've got me on that 40-degree day operating under our awning. On a little hilltop. So we got all of the transverters and got the radios all set up there. Bottom left is generally what our field day operations look like. Our bottom left and top right, our field day operations. So between summer and winter, there can be quite a substantial difference. But we've got a new field day van, which makes operating a lot easier because we're at least out of the elements now, rather than sitting in the blazing hot sun or the freezing cold, we've got somewhere nice to set up. And that's on top of Mount Wellington. And bottom right-hand corner is Richard 7ZBX looking through the rifle scope towards the moon and lining up that dish for 10 gigs. So some additional resources. You can head over and have a look at my channel for some experiments that I did. One interesting one is using an old grid pack, an old Ozstar grid pack, and I mounted a one of those PCB antennas, PCB log periodic antennas in the feed, and then I ran that back to the transverter, and that works very, very well actually. For sideband, the log periodic can only handle about 5 to 10 watts on FM, so my 20 watts or above on 3.4 gigahertz burns up the tracks. So, but for single sideband, it works perfectly fine. So there's a video of that. You can Google Microwaves 101 and you'll find that website, microwaves101.com, which explains a lot of the terms. The ARRL, I made this presentation for mainly a US audience. So there's the ARRL, but there's also some VK resources as well. The Australian Ham Radio Discussion Forum has some posts on it. VK4GHZ Adam has a YouTube channel, and some of his older videos have also microwave videos on them. Paul Wade, W1GHZ, he's got a lot of information on his website as well for getting started and home brewing and things. So, in conclusion, basically getting into microwaves, it can be challenging, but it can be very rewarding, and it can be a fun part of the hobby. It's rarely explored. We're getting more and more stations on it, which is great, and especially if it's really fun for field days. So we've got 3 field days a year. We've also got other contests that incorporate the higher bands as well. So definitely great to experiment with those. Definitely, I recommend getting on at least 1.2 gigahertz and experimenting with that, because 1.2 gigs is a great entry band to get on, and it's very easy to make antennas and get antennas and equipment. Equipment can be sourced new, or they can be built from commercial parts, as I covered. Antennas are relatively cheap and easy to experiment with. So the other thing that I forgot to mention is those SG Lab transverters do come with little PCB antennas, so you can screw those into the transverter, and you can go outside and mount it on a small pole or something, and you're good to go. You're already on the band, so that's good. And then you can sort of build up from there and make a dish or make a yagi, or experiment with all sorts of soup can antennas, all sorts of things that are fun. And obviously there's ultimate challenges such as Earth, Moon, Earth on the high band. So once you start experimenting with those, you can have a go at EME and try and make contact all around the world using the moon. And basically just give it a go. Just have a crack, and once you start doing it, you'll find that your wallet gets very, very light, and you want to just keep on doing it. So, that's pretty much the end of my presentation.